Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. My guest today has over a decade in cybersecurity, and it's actually a former employee of mine. He's currently the leader of data protection organization for a large title insurance organization. Ian Kicmol, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ward, for having me. Happy to be here.
Really excited to have you here. You ready to get into it?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Perfect. In your professional opinion, what's the biggest challenge organizations are facing when it comes to data security?
Yeah, so I think that there's two pillars to that question. We'll start with one and then go to the other. So it's pretty, I find it an obvious one, but maybe not so obvious the higher you go up in an organization is people. Um, I know there's a lot of talk with AI replacing, jobs and people everywhere. Amazon cutting, as just an example. Um, but I think people are really the core of having a successful, program. AI's, in my opinion, from everything I've been digging into it for a long time now. Like it's not there to replace everybody right now. It's not mature enough. Everyone thinks it is. High up leadership and a lot of organizations think it's the magic silver bullet for all their problems. And I think they're going to be, if not already are, a little disappointed that it's not panning out that way. I know, like I've seen reports that companies sunk trillions of dollars in this last year, to replace jobs, whether it's low level, entry level jobs or higher level jobs with some sort of AI. I think it's a good tool that you have in your toolbox as a person, but I don't think it's a replacement right now for the people that you need to run all of your tools. It's just I don't think it's there. Um, so I think it's important that organizations spend time and focus and put, the money, the effort into the talent that they acquire to make sure that, you get those people, those resources, and you have them for a long period of time or however long, they want to be there. And, it's good for them. Like I run into, my current position, people wanting to shift around, they're doing something, it gets a little tedious or boring. They want to be more involved, and just naturally, I think that's something natural people want to do. They want to do more. They want to feel like they're contributing. They want to, advance, grow, learn. That's what I, really thrive on. So, um, that's a challenge is trying to figure out how can I make that happen? I want to do that. I want to provide everything I can, and I think organizations really need to foster that message is like, how do you get those people?
Totally agree. I think finding the people, right? Finding the right talents, the right mentality for a good data security organization is tough as well. We've probably got some listeners to the podcast that are looking to build out a program. So, like, what would you recommend that people should be looking for in people to bring into their organizations?
Yeah, I really like to focus in on kind of the common sense aspect of it. I've interviewed a lot of people more lately, on different positions and like looking at that. And there's always a technical interview and then the personal interview to see if you kind of match, at least two, at this kind of the positions, we're looking for. And the first one is really like I think a lot of people over worry on trying to explain every single detail and every single thing. As a leader in data protection, I want to make sure that you have the overall generic kind of like, how do you get from step A to step B? Just tell me, keep it simple, because if I ask you how a tool works, or how do you solve for this issue, and you start going down a rabbit hole of like, well, I'm going to do this, and that's like, it makes me a little worried because I'm like, that's I don't want to say too technical because I need, those people that are very technical. But I'm just trying to understand because other leadership, they want to know if something broke, how do you fix it? What was the problem? And it needs to be in plain English. So it kind of falls back on like, how do you communicate? So that kind of ties into it is make it simple, make it easy to digest and understand. Even if you're a very technical person, other people that are probably higher up are not. So they need to have that, layman's terms, whatever you want to call it, to be able to know what the problem is very quickly so that they can assess the situation and see what resources you may need or what how bad is it, overall or good, But that's yeah, so people ties into, I guess, a communication aspect, that I think is so important. And so maybe this will actually be 3 things instead of just 2. As I'm going down, this it's communication, is also, I tell my team that. I talk with other leaders, at my organization with that. It's important in life in general, but I think in the technical field, while you're working with all these different tools and applications and how they function, the ability to communicate that, technical or non-technical, is incredibly important. And I think that's helped me, do what I, get to do today and, get to where I am is I'm kind of in that in between area. I'm not the most technical person, but I'm not technical, so being able to filter it one way and spit it out the other, for either way, is incredibly important.
And I think that's important specifically in data security, right? Because oftentimes, like you made the point talking to leadership, right? And leadership may or may not have technical knowledge. They might not be able to talk the nerd talk with you, if you will. Um, but really talking the business as well. In data security, a lot of the things that you're doing or should be doing, right, for the listener, should be doing is talking to business partners, champions out there to say, what do you guys have? Right? What are you doing? What are you creating? And to your point, Ian, when it comes to folks on your team, right, folks in the data security organization, if you can't talk nerdy with your peers, right, from an engineering perspective to build things, but also transition to be able to talk business, you're probably not going to be incredibly successful. So, kind of going back to finding the folks, right, in your interviews that you mentioned, how are you gauging some of that? Because certainly to your point, you're looking for technical skills. You need those, right? You need to keep the lights on to keep things moving. But when it comes to, but maybe filling some gaps on folks that can talk to the business, maybe consultant type individuals, how are you sussing that out?
It's a good question. I like to pose questions, like maybe a technical question where I know the short answer of it. However, I want to see if they can provide that similar answer. And like that's how I can kind of suss that out is if I ask a question and it could be a very technical question, but I like to look at it from that point of view of, well, if I'm going to ask you this as, if you're going to be a senior, engineer or whatever, on my team, and I'm going to ask you a technical question, I'm going to need that information, not so embedded in the technicality, unless that's what I request, because I'm going to have to take your information, probably modify it a little bit, and then give that to a higher leadership because, everything goes with the chain of command. You got to figure out, who has to talk to who. So as it gets filtered, up, it gets changed, modified, and the core of the message has to stay there. What is the actual issue or problem, or what are you trying to describe to me? So I like to present those technical questions, but really in my mind, tell me it so I can understand it easier. because there's other people, like I said, as you go up higher, usually, not all the time, but usually the technicality, that of their understanding is a little bit lessened because they're more focused on business and operations and like makes sense. That's how it functions. So yeah, that's definitely I think the main way to try and, like you said, suss that out is how can they describe it. If they go way too technical, I may ask, okay, how would you explain that in an easier, simplified term? And if they can't quite get there, then, their mindset's like really stuck technical. Not that that's a bad thing, but that helps me understand if there was an event, an incident, a crisis, something like that, could this person be able to provide me that message quickly of what's happening? And, I can kind of gauge that. Well, if they can't do that, do I have someone else? And I think it's important for everyone. I don't think it's mandatory that everyone has to be able to do that. It's just hard. Everyone's different. But I need some of those people though that can speak, like that, whether it's technical, non-technical, that's why I keep hammering home, like I said with my team is communication, like the ability to know your audience, how to convey that is more important than I think a lot of people really realize, especially in our field.
Well, also know the urgency, right? That was a piece that you touched on, but didn't say it explicitly because like I mentioned in the intro, once upon a time you worked for me, and I remember coming to you sometimes because you were one of my trusted folks. Be like, all right, Ian, what's going on? And you could tell pretty quickly, like, oh man, Ward is looking for the 2 second answer, bluntly, versus more of a conversation. All right, guys, what's happening? That's more of the opportunity to talk through it. So, I think, going back to your point about communication. So knowing the audience, knowing the situation, but knowing how much time do you have, right? Is it a be bright, be there, be bright, be gone? Or is it more of like, hey, let's have a dissertation about it to just to talk about all the angles?
Yeah, and usually in these kind of things, at least how I've seen it is, it's always it's the give me the cliff note 2 second. I need to know to communicate this. And then I always, we share that, and then after the fact, that's where, the dissertation, the working notes, whatever you wanna call it, we'll write those out. We've actually had to create templates because it saves us a lot of time on that, the what, the when, the who, the why, the where, your standard questions, right? For, some kind of investigation or event. Because eventually leadership wants to know those kind of details. Okay, what exactly caused it? Why? Um, but in most cases, it's very much the give me the quick and then send that on to like, should we panic about this? Should we not panic about this? I think that's what leadership really hones in on, which is fair, that they have to assess that risk immediately, because how does this impact the business? Um, because you have to keep the business going, that's number one. So, but yeah, I think that those how you can do that is one of the biggest.
I'd love to pivot, so we're talking a lot about, conversation of people around the technical aspect, which in data security is huge, right? Because there's tool integration, tool ownership, tool configuration, yada yada yada, right? All those super important, super knowledgeable things. There's also the other facet of data security, which may or may not be in the data security organization. It might be in the SOC, but it's more of the operations piece. Hey, maybe in a DLP tool, we saw this thing happen, not necessarily sure if it's good or bad, normal. Um, I found, not sure about you, but I found, sometimes that requires a different mentality when it comes to not only conversation, but also thinking through, like trying to understand what was the context and what was the meaning behind what that person's trying to do. And certainly, if you can't figure it out through the telemetry given to you, talking, the scary part, talking to the business user to say, hey, you're not in trouble, but what were you doing? So when it comes to that piece, how do you look for those folks? Because again, in my opinion, very different than an engineer mentality.
It kind of falls back in in different aspects of it where, again, keeping it simple, because a lot of the time when like an end user will trigger an event, they won't have any idea. They won't know why. They'll get some kinda, maybe it's an email that's sent back to them that says, "Oh, hey, this is blocked because you sent this," or then they panic or they think, "Oh, I'm in trouble," or, like, so I think step 1 is in any kind of messaging like that. I've never been to an organization that doesn't have some kind of automated something, some facet. You gotta give a user direction. How can they actually have a face-to-face conversation with someone, or, a phone call or something, to understand what happened, what they did, how do they resolve it? So that's one thing that has to be there. And usually it's a phone number, an email, "Hey, reach out to this team if you have questions," et cetera. That's what we do today. Um, and then, yeah, it's very much being able to explain, that to the person. "Okay, let's look at your event, let's see what happened. We'll pull that up, and then you can talk through it." And I think I've always done that, and that's where there's been confusion or questions, especially, when I've done this in the past. It's just walking it through it as if I was looking at it to triage it myself, but with someone else. I go, "Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, you sent this. Let's say it was an email that got flagged for social security numbers. You sent this email to this person at this time. Here's the body. Here's the attachment." You kind of walk them through very step by step, very methodical, like, "Okay, here's what triggered on." You can even show them, like, "This is what you sent right there." Most DLP tools highlight it in yellow or, whatever color. And, just to make it so, because sometimes people feel like they're in trouble and they don't want to be in trouble. And they're like, "Oh, I never did that." Well, it helps when you walk them through and explain, this is why it did that. Now, obviously, you don't give, the secret sauce of like thresholds or, whatever like that to the end user. But, it's like, well, we have policies that trigger on certain amounts, and you hit that amount. So here you go. You can see this is what it caught. If it's false positive, you work with them, on, "Hey, maybe it was an issue on our end. We'll fix that. You're fine." If they got blocked, you'd be like, "Here's better secure ways to do that." But I think it's you just kind of break it down step by step by step by step with the end user, if they reach out and have those kind of problems. It depends. Of what I've seen, it's someone sends it and be like, "Oh, never mind, I can't do that." Some other people are like, "Holy crap, why can't I do this? This is a problem." And they immediately reach out or make a ticket or, something like that. So again, it does rely on that communication aspect. I think I'll go back to that a lot, but it's just breaking it down, very easily for them, and finding operations folks that can do that. You know, can they work with an end user like that? Do they have those talking skills? Again, very important to find people. And that's a little, there's not a lot of technical parts with that to get lost in the weeds, because if you're just following like how you would do it, it's pretty clean, clear English, like bump, 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 that's how it is, you
Yeah.
know.
"Hey, you sent this email and it clearly had sensitive information. What are you
Right.
doing? What's the business process? Is that okay?" Yeah. And I think you hit it there. It's operations folks, right? Because I know in my experience, and I've had been successful with some of this, but I don't always throw my engineers, right? My super smart folks that are building things at those conversations, because oftentimes the engineer, they want to dive into the tech. "Oh, you did this thing and it was using this protocol," and you've already lost the end user, right? You've already lost the end user. Versus someone more consultative that can literally sit down and be like, "Hey, first off, you're not in trouble. Nice to meet you. What do you do? Here's what I do." Um, different mentality, right? Completely different mentality. So for me, as I've built out a data security organization, I've often had to be like, "All right, like I'm looking for an engineer. Here's the skill sets. Let's have those conversations." Communication, to your point, still incredibly important. Now I'm looking for an ops individual or an analyst, whatever the organization calls it. Um, Different skill sets, maybe more analytical, right? Data science type of skill sets. And oh, by the way, communication also super important, but maybe on a technical facet, right? So understanding the skill sets, I think, super important.
Yeah, and that's kinda how the team is built now is, our operation folks, they have, a good ability to communicate like that, with end users, when it's necessary. And then on the engineering side, I have a couple seniors which can get, very much into the weeds. So usually our end facing on the engineering side is like our like level one engineers because they interface more often, with end users, whether it's blocks of DLP or something like that. They'll create tickets and our guys will reach out, to them to problem solve. So they'll have those conversations, and it's something I've learned in this role that's just I like to be there, to help out, especially if they're unsure. I'm like, I have no problem joining this conversation. I like to try and make myself available, when it's necessary to be like, hey, let's take a step back. Let's look at this at a very plain, basic kind of view. Cause I think that can like level set with everyone, looking at these things. How can we get everyone on the same page? So we're not all, not too technical, people aren't, bouncing all over. Let's get everyone at the start, talk through it, figure out how do we resolve it. That definitely helps. And I think doing that with my team, helps them, it builds their ability, to just have that communication skill, and work through it.
Totally agree. So we talked about people, we talked about communication. You said maybe there's a third item. What's the other one?
So this will be more on the, I guess, the technical aspect of it is how do you manage all the events and the alerts and how do you not get buried? The ingestion and the volume, we struggle with that.
I'm actually going to pause you real quick, Ian, on that. I was, funny enough, I was just having a conversation about this last week with an organization. So I'm looking forward to your answer. So where are you going with this? That's a big problem. What are we doing?
So what I am trying to build out in this coming year, is a data governance council. So I think every organization needs to have a group of people, whatever name you want to call it, whatever fancy, it doesn't matter. But you need people from the engineering aspect, their managers, higher ups, that can really, pull the strings and make decision calls. You need legal team if you have any sub businesses, leadership from those, sub businesses, in the org, but different aspects that all come together, a council of like the heads of those departments and just have conversations about your roles. Like on the engineering side, we can provide the metrics of false positives, the volumes, what are we seeing? Do we feel it's valuable? We can kind of give our initial, here's our assessment. I think as a data, security, group, our main purpose, besides protecting data is to um, give the thought process of like, hey, like our recommendation, I should say, give our recommendation on what we feel may be better, but then have the people in this, the council, be able to choose and sign off on it. And that's what we're trying to build out is, legal has their own requirements. Maybe we have to have it, even if we don't see there's value. Maybe legally, because of whatever agreement or something, we have to have this. Okay, then that's good to know. Someone else higher up on, the engineering side of stuff, the CISO, we can give our recommendation. They'd be like, okay, do we have a requirement? Do we not? If we don't, then I think it's okay for maybe to auto close them, so you're not spending man hours or remove the role if there's really no value. And maybe it was put in there as a test. Maybe it was for something. And maybe over time you're like, this is covered in another role, or we don't really need this because it's just keywords, or we struggle with that. So what I think has to happen is you have to have those heads that can all be on the same call, and talk through it, and everybody signs off on it right then and there. Because what I've experienced, at my current position or other positions, is in a one-on-one conversation, people can be very agreeable and, oh yeah, I agree. You should turn that off. You should disable that. We go, okay, but we can't just do that because you said it. We need to get multiple people have to sign off on it. So while it's great, for you to agree with me and everyone actually agrees with me, I need everyone to agree with each other in a single forum. Um, so that if I do turn it off, or I say, okay, we're going to make a change to do this, everyone's on board and no one's like, oh, why did this happen? This is a problem. Why'd you do that? We can be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Everybody said, let's do this. We signed it, whether, I don't know where we keep that, we keep it somewhere saying, everybody said this was good. So you always have something to fall back on because, auditors like to see that stuff. And that's always something, we have to think on engineering, in the back of our minds. So that's kind of I think the biggest step is getting people together to talk through roles, to see the value. Should you auto close them? Should you turn them off? Um, I personally call that like step one of tuning, because what happens in a lot of organizations, you buy tools. You'll implement the tool in its bare bone form. It works. That's awesome. You check that box. Hey, the tool functions. What's your next step though? Because as you turn more things on, whether it's endpoint security, web security, email, you ingest all that stuff. And even with the team, I have 8 people in our operations side of things. We get millions of events, and I'm not exaggerating, on like a weekly basis. And it's like, it's impossible. Like, there is no man hours that a company would invest in looking through that many alerts, because a lot of them, it's a lot of noise, and you have to try and figure out how can you filter through that.
Oh yeah.
And that's where the second part of tuning comes in.
Yeah, I think going back to your idea of the council, super great idea, right? I think all organizations should have something like that. I've seen though, and I'm sure you've seen this too, the more people that you get involved in a council, the more opportunity for analysis paralysis, right? Nobody wants to be that first person to say, "Yes, I agree, we should do it," or maybe somebody always wants to be that person, right? Maybe you've got a very big talker in the group that's willing to do that. But I think the problem you have is, and it's actually a good problem in a way, is you got the various opinions, the various ideas, and it's all great to put into that melting pot, right? Stir around, see what you brew at that point. But the problem I've had a few times now is then you fall into the analysis paralysis, right? You go through it and you say, "Oh man, okay, we've now talked for 30 minutes on going back to your example on this rule, right? Whatever the rule is, doesn't matter. We've talked for 30 minutes on this rule. The opening salvo was we believe the rule is not important, so we want to turn it off. 30 minutes later, where do we land? And you kind of get those people staring at each other. Who's going to say something? And you don't land anywhere. Um, so not that I have an idea how to fix it. I'm not sure if you do. Like, what are your thoughts? How do you maybe stay away from or avoid analysis paralysis when you get a big group of folks together for that?
Yeah, well, I think the initial messaging has to be very clear, very concise, and you have to give the options too. Like, maybe my personal recommendation would be, yes, I don't see the value. I think it should be turned off. But then also follow that with, however, if this is necessary or someone else feels that there is some value of why we do need to keep this role, we have other options. Like, we have our tools can automatically close these events and tag them automatic, like we could do some of that automation aspect, because And if you kind of frame it in the we only have so many man hours, and we want those man hours to be spent looking at like our highs, and mediums, like where the biggest threats could actually happen. If someone's exfiltrating, thousands of social security numbers, we want them looking at those events, not the onesie twosie, like maybe it was one, or maybe it's a false positive, So we can frame it in that sense of, okay, if you're not comfortable, going with the recommendation, here's another thing we can do. Maybe we can't get rid of it right now because, people aren't comfortable, but we're then not spending man hours digging through this. So the problem essentially becomes, it's still high volume, and it's still something that can be reported on and be like, okay, it's still a problem, but for our team, it's essentially solved either way, right? Either it's gone and we're not looking at it, or it's auto closed and tagged and we're not looking at it unless an event sparks, and then we can, go back, and pull that up.
I'm gonna bring this full circle on you, and I'm gonna bring this full circle. So you mentioned early on in this conversation, people being important, some organizations saying, "Hey, AI can do this, right? Let's do." There's a lot of organizations out there that are going all in on AI and doing layoffs. Unfortunately, right? People are losing their jobs and looking for new jobs. So I'm going to challenge you. Like, I've got my own answer on this. I think you've actually heard my soapbox on this before, but I'm going to challenge you now, Ian. So millions of events, maybe some noise. From a data security perspective, why the heck can't we just use AI to filter through everything? Like, can we? Right? What are your thoughts? Is AI kind of a solution here?
So that's where the auto closing and tagging of certain things that can help. And now I don't think that's really AI. That's just, hey, if it's a bad rule, or, not a bad rule, but if the rule isn't providing anything, yes, you can automatically do that. Um, I I don't think it's either commercially, I don't want to say possible, but not easy for organizations. Now, organizations, so let me take a step back. I think a lot of companies that provide data security tools to us, our businesses, I think that they're investing more in AI, and they're trying to get that as part of their platform. It's the hot keyword. It's going to be around for forever now, so you really have to embrace it in a certain aspect. I think that those tools, though, are not there. I think it's very plain. Anything I've seen, while they may have solutions and they may have parts of AI, I don't think we're at a point that it replaces a person completely. Like I said, at the near the beginning, it's a nice toolbox thing to have. I use it all the time. Whether it's to learn and understand something, or maybe, hey, what's the best way that we can maybe do something like this, But I just think that person has to make those decision calls unless you have an AI built into your tool that is ingesting all of this data and making those and learning. It has to learn, and I don't think that's commercially available at a cost level that a lot of organizations can afford. That may be an Amazon thing or a Microsoft thing, where their budgets are essentially limitless. They can take those tools and say, hey, we're going to have a tool learn about data security, and it's going to triage the events like a person would. We're going to get that output after a month, and it's going to train and learn, and we'll tell it, no, that was wrong. Yes, that was correct. Maybe one day we'll get there. I assume probably over time, but I think you still have to have that person, because then how do you escalate something that is a problem? Maybe the AI could be like, oh, yep, someone sent, 1,000 SSNs out. That's bad. But then it has to somehow communicate that. So it can be an alert. So you could get that alert, but then like a person still has to verify it. I mean, even if AI is doing it, you still want some other person to verify it, to like make sure, hey, did it not mess up? AI messes up all the time, still. And I think it's still gonna mess up in the future. So you need that like second set of eyes, double check it, verify it. Yes, it was. Again, that can help train it, but then that person still has to be there to communicate and have that conversation with the important parties. So I think no matter how much AI really gets involved, yes, it's very good at doing repetitive, simple, well understood tasks, and it'll learn and grow and it'll be able to do more complex things. But that fact that you still need those people there, I think always will make it, you know, I don't see our positions, our jobs just being overtaken by a robot anytime soon. I'll say that. Maybe one day, but maybe I will be retired by then or not here. I think it's way down the road. I don't think it won't. I think it will happen one day. Um, but I think the positions we have now, um, you have to have people are an important component at some level of that, no matter what.
Completely agree. I think and I've certainly had this discussion multiple times over, well, last decade, I guess we'll say. I would say my entire career, but AI really hasn't been around for my entire career. But for me, it always comes back to understanding or trying to determine intent, right? The robots, right? Our robot overlords that are coming, they're really good at looking, black and white and maybe trying to extrapolate like, hey, I see Ward sent this data to what looks like Ward's personal email. So I can assume, right, from a robot perspective, that he's trying to steal data, right? But the human could go in and be like, oh, well, yeah, like the facts are the facts. Ward did send Ward some data, um, but is his W 2. And I know we are in March, April timeframe. So Ward's doing his taxes, right? The human. Now, to your point, our robot overlords can probably eventually figure that out, right? Learn, be able to have some temporal, type nature to it with that. But for me, that's why I always say, like, look, AI is great to the point you made. It can help kind of do some repetitive
Mundane,
tasks.
yeah.
Yeah, the basics, right? Maybe do some data analytics for you and big data sets, but to sit down and try to, determine intents, it's just not there. Yeah. Humans need to determine human nature.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, maybe it'll get there one day. I expect it will, but I do think we are a long ways away from it having the capability, that we as humans have, to, like you said, determine the intent.
I like it. So, some great solutions here to the overall data security challenge. You talked about people, all right? You talked about communication. And you talked about having a data security council or whatever you call it, data security group, what have you. Champions is what another guest had called them as well. But I think having that forum probably is what you're talking about, a place where you have those conversations. Very good. Well, with all you brought today, Ian, it's clear that you've been doing this for a while. So how did you get to where you are today in your career? What was your journey?
Yeah. It's it started out, I graduated with information security, had no idea what that meant, probably about 12, almost 12 years ago now. What I really wanted to do, I got brought in as an intern, a couple months turned around to hire me full time because I got involved in the tools. It was very much incident response, which I think, even nowadays is an entry level, into getting to what we do. You got to understand how the tools function and work, as so you can advance. And then I got some opportunities, shifting around. I got to own a data security platform while I was at that organization. I managed the whole thing, which felt like a lot, only being, like I was only in there a couple years, and it was like, hey, this is all yours. You're gonna upgrade it. You're gonna write the rules for it. You're gonna do, everything, for this tool. You own it. But it was a great experience that a previous boss, that is still one of my my mentors today, he gave me that opportunity, to take that on. And I think that's very important for leadership. I know you do it, to help individuals in the field, have that sense of ownership, and like they can do something, help them, guide them. From there, I was pretty much headhunted to work for a large bank in the area because of my skills of doing it for so long. It was the same tool. They want to do the very much same things that I've been doing for years, at that point. So I moved into that position, became more of like I guess you want to say more of a senior, with the tool and how it functions and everything with that. Um, and then I moved into a government position to kind of lead a very small team, me and another individual. But again, to own that tool for uh, government and health, and manage it. So we did that, implemented it, made it run, upgraded, added stuff to it, which is really great. And then I got the opportunity to I like to keep learning and keep growing and keep, what struck me at the current position I'm at is there was a bunch of new tools that I had no experience with. And, I thank you every day. You brought me in because I understand the knowledge, like if you do something enough, regardless of the tool, you know how it can function, at least with data loss prevention, you understand the basics. So you gave me that opportunity to, come aboard and just, kind of take ownership of certain tools, things I haven't worked with, learn them, on the spot, which that's some of the best learning, you can get is, hey, we're paying you to, do this job and you got to learn how this tool works. So figure it out. And I did, I did that. And then as things shift and move around, I got the opportunity, just with knowing what I knew, at the organization, being very, reliable, whatever else that, leadership have, seen, got me into a leadership, role that oversees a team and now another team. So two teams, roll up into me now. And now I can take all that knowledge, that I've learned, um, and just trying to give back, really is like I still want to stay as technical as I can, because I like doing the thing, pushing the button, turning the wrench, I enjoy that a lot. But being able to really push communication skills and leverage, the people aspect is I like to think of myself as being that in between the technical and the non-technical is I'm kind of in the middle where I can understand a lot on both ends and be able to filter that to different groups as needed. And I think that's where I think a lot of organizations, they should really foster those kind of people because I think it helps. Um, but yeah, I've been in all. I've been in education, government, health, financial, financial again, in a sense, so covering every I guess core data type, has been a big boost as well, working with medical data, compared to banking data, compared to student, education, data. It's all different aspects. And I think that definitely helped me get me where I'm at is I've seen a lot of different data. So how do you, create rules and programs now, to kind of better cover all of that different type of data?
Definitely quite the journey. So, knowing what you know today, the position you're in today, if you could go back in time, we'll say a decade, you could go back 10 years and give yourself some advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Learn how to study better for certifications and exams. Um,
Test taking.
yeah, getting those is was rough. But really, I would tell myself always be open to learning something, even if it's small, even if it's how a protocol works, even if it's something not in specifically data protection. Like as I see things now and as I work with more and more teams to solve issues, whether it's networking or servers, Linux or, things like that, I think I would tell myself like just be open to all of that and have maybe a generalistic, very basic understanding. As I learn all that stuff now, working with these teams for solving issues, I'm learning as much. Okay, how does this work for you? How does this function? I ask those questions because I am curious because I want to know, but I can utilize that knowledge to help in the future of like if there's future problems. And I think early on I was very focused on like, okay, I need data protection. How do I solve? How do I write the rule? How do I do? And it's very specific. But so much, I mean, technology is just like you say, hey, I do data security today. I mean, that could mean 100 different things, whereas maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was a little more narrow. There was very specific, like, I think cloud was a mystery. And, it was this like grand thing that wasn't really like it was, even 5 years ago, and now it's very common. It's like that's just use, it's just a common thing, so yeah, I think and as, people are coming into the field now, be open, try and learn everything you can. You don't have to be an expert at it. You don't have to be a professional in every single degree. I am not. Um, but wanting to learn and know and be hungry for that information, I think everyone should in this field should want to have that. It's a big driver. I think it helps you be successful, reach for more, go for more, go higher up the chain. What positions do you want to do? No one wants to do, I mean, maybe some people do, but I don't think you want to come into instant response and be like, that's it. That's all I want to do ever. I think, or, just ticketing or, triage. Like, I think it's really good to foster, to help with people and then foster their curiosity, what they want to learn. Say, oh, hey, you're actually really good at communicating about this or doing stuff like this. Do you want to learn about X, Y, and Z? Maybe they do. They want someone, either their boss or another team member, to kind of be like, hey, I see that you do this. Let's kind of build on that. Let's really help you, do that. I think that's so important. So yeah, that's what I would tell myself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's good advice today too, not just 10 years ago. I know for me, I think all of us in security, like you either have to keep learning or you get left in the dust. There's still knowledge that I learned 20 years ago that is still relevant today. I think probably the same thing for yourself, but not as relevant, right? Times, technology have changed. That's for darn sure.
Times be a changing, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Ian, if folks want to connect with you, maybe add you to their own network, what's the best way to do so?
I'm on LinkedIn. I believe it's Ian Kissel one. Um, Not many more of me. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Please, feel free if you want to connect, pick my brain about anything I said. I'm more than happy to help. I think, especially in our field, a lot of us, whether we go to different positions, you still stay connected, with the people. And more often than not, I've noticed, even in just 12 years, and there's a lot of people that's been doing this, a lot longer than I have, you end up, returning to those people. You see those people in another job, you end up working with them again, so like really building that community, how you can help, I think goes a long way because you never know, you know, you always be helpful, always share information, and you never know, what kind of doors or opportunities or, it could help you, you know, in the future. But yeah, I'm happy to talk with whoever and help.
Perfect. Well, Ian, it was great having you on today. Thank you so much for joining.
Yes, thank you very much, Ward. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. And big thank you to the audience. Really hope you enjoyed the episode today and learned something. Please tell others in your network to follow and listen. This has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centro. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte-scale data protection without the fuss, please visit centro.io. Catch you next time.